Hey, thank you, everybody. And a Friday morning, breaking news this morning. New reaction pouring in now after the stunning verdict in the Kate Steinle murder trial. A California jury acquitting an illegal immigrant of murder charges in the shooting death of Steinle, a case that sparked a fierce national debate over sanctuary cities. There was a lot on this today as we say hello here inside of America's Newsroom. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, Sandra. Good morning to you.
And good morning to you, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. Kate Steinle was shot and killed in July of 2015 on that San Francisco pier by a Mexican national who had previously been deported 5 times. Attorneys reacting to the jury's decision.
Both sides gave it their all. Both sides had good lawyers in court. They presented the case the way that they did. And at the end of the day, it's the jury that determines what the verdict is.
I hope that they do not interpret this verdict as diminishing in any way the awful tragedy that occurred and that their family has suffered. This jury's verdict should be respected.
After the ruling yesterday, President Trump tweeting, quote, "A disgraceful verdict in the Kate Steinle case. No wonder the people of our country are so angry with illegal immigration."
William Jeanine leading our coverage live in California, in L.A. now with the latest. William, good morning.
Well, Bill, now comes word this is not over. The Justice Department said in the last few hours it may charge Zarate for violating Steinle's civil rights or felony reentry. Now, typically you get about 2 years for that when you come back into the country after being deported. But because Zarate had some prior convictions, he could get up to 10 years from an immigration judge, not a San Francisco jury. But this trial was never about immigration, and the jury never heard about his illegal status or the deportations. The question was the shooting a murder or an accident? And the jury decided there was no motive, no intent, and acquitted Zarate of first and second degree murder, manslaughter, and assault with a deadly weapon. He was found guilty as a felon of possession of a firearm. Now, the verdict shocked prosecutors, but not the public defender, who argued the gun went off accidentally.
The physical evidence has always supported the finding that this was an accidental occurrence, and I think the jury came to that conclusion.
Now, prosecutors said Zarate fired deliberately into the crowd and ran from the scene. Now, after 6 days of deliberation last night, the jurors asked to see the gun, which defense claimed had a modified hair trigger. Hours later came the verdict.
The verdict that came in today was not one we were hoping for, but I think it's unequivocal. Both sides gave it their all.
So motive was one sticking point, ballistics the other, because it showed that the bullet actually ricocheted off the pavement before hitting Kate Steinle.
How is the family reacting now, William?
Well, Kate's father told the San Francisco Examiner last night, quoting, "We are just shocked and saddened. Justice was rendered, but it was not served." Her brother Brad said he was not surprised, considering the epic failure of San Francisco's sanctuary policy. And moments ago, the Justice Department, as I said it was considering new charges that could keep Zarate in prison for years.
We will, again, prosecute this to the fullest extent available under the law, because these cases are tragic and they're entirely preventable.
So sentencing comes in about 2 weeks. He's facing 1 to 3 years in prison, but Bill, he could get time served. Now, there is a warrant filed, so San Francisco can't simply release him again. The federal government will probably take custody of him and put him in a federal prison, and we'll see what the DOJ comes up with. But now, as you know, comes the political fallout.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. William Jeanine reporting there in L.A. Sandra has more here.
President Trump reacting strongly to the verdict in the Steinle case, one he highlighted often from the campaign trail. White House correspondent Kevin Corke is live from the North Lawn. Kevin, what's the response from the White House?
Well, listen, if you had an opportunity, Sandra, to check out Fox and Friends this morning, I know you did, but for the folks at home who may have missed it, Kellyanne Conway said the White House was simply shocked and saddened. And as you also pointed out earlier here on this broadcast, the president, frankly, it didn't take long for him to weigh in on what many are calling a miscarriage of justice. Let me take you back to Twitter. The president tweeting often about this particular case. He said the Kate Steinle killer came back and back over the weakly protected Obama border, always committing crimes and being violent, and yet this info was not used in court. His exoneration is a complete travesty of justice. Build the wall. On July 1st, 2015, 32-year-old Steinle died in a hospital 2 hours after being shot in the back by that bullet, which, as you pointed out, ricocheted off the concrete over the Embarcadero in San Francisco while she was walking with her father and a friend. That bullet coming from a .40 caliber handgun held by the Mexican national who had unlawfully been in this country. Zarate claimed he fired that shot accidentally after picking up the gun, which he had found moments before. Now, it's also interesting, you heard William point out, there could be more to this, meaning the Department of Justice could figure out a way to come up with some federal charges. That is certainly under consideration. We'll keep an eye on that from our perch here at the White House, Sandra.
And Kevin's plenty of speculation this morning about the future of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. What is the White House saying on that?
Well, listen, he's here until he's not. Right? I mean, that's the basic message, and you're going to hear them sort of deliver this over and over, certainly for the foreseeable future. By the way, for the record, the Secretary will actually be here at the White House later today. Previously scheduled. He's going to be here. We don't expect pictures from that sit-down with the President. But by the way, look, as long as he's on the job, the White House says he will be doing the job of working on behalf of the American people.
Do you want Rex Tillerson on the job, Mr. President?
He's here. Rex is here.
Look, as we've said many times before, as many of you love to write these type of stories, when the president loses confidence in someone, they will no longer serve in the capacity that they're in.
Okay, this is the thing about Washington. You know this and I know this. This is a rumor town, right? So you're going to hear rumors like this often. Chief of Staff John Kelly making it clear Rex isn't going anywhere anytime soon. That doesn't mean that something couldn't happen in January, which has also been speculated. Very quickly, I should point out Mike Pompeo, a person that a lot of people, Sandra, are saying could replace him, and then Tom Cotton could replace him over at the agency. Again, a lot of inside baseball. We'll be watching it very carefully. Back to you.
Lots of speculation out there. Kevin Corke, thank you. Well, after the Kate Steinle murder trial verdict, we'll get reaction from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in our next hour amid the renewed debate over sanctuary city policies.
More breaking news this morning. We're awaiting a likely Senate vote on the Republican tax bill today. They're rewriting it on the fly. Late in the evening last night, negotiations grinding to a halt over concerns that bill would drive up the deficit. Guy Benson, political editor, townhall.com, Fox News contributor. And Guy, good morning to you.
Hey, Bill.
You're speaking to folks on the Hill. What are they saying?
Well, Bill, this morning I was on the phone with two sources, one in leadership and one on the Finance Committee side. And there was definitely a snag last night where the Democrats put what's called a motion to commit on the floor to send the bill back to committee, which would have effectively killed the bill. And there was at least one or two Republican senators, notably Bob Corker of Tennessee, who were flirting with the idea of going along with the Democrats. Eventually that was quashed and they moved forward, but there were some issues still on the table outstanding. And overnight and early this morning, senators in negotiations trying to hammer out just enough tweaks. I wouldn't say it's a major rewrite of the bill at all, but some tweaks to ensure that they will have 50+1 votes by the time this thing is voted on, potentially later today. I asked both of my sources this morning point blank, does this get done today, and is there a vote sometime within the next 12 hours? And they both said just short of a guarantee, probably, and we're feeling very good. So optimism yesterday, some drama overnight, more optimism again this morning with a couple wavering, potentially wavering senators, Daines from Montana, Johnson from Wisconsin, putting out statements this morning confirming that they will be yes votes when it comes down to it.
Never done till it's done, right? And they need 50 to Mike Pence to break a tiebreaker on that. Senator Langford out of Oklahoma. Chad Pergram, our producer on the Hill, was in touch with his office last night. They're a joint committee on taxation. It's called the JCT. They came in with an deficit that said this was going to add another $1 trillion in debt, correct? And Langford said the following about that. He does not understand why this JCT score seems to be freaking everyone out. The score is grossly underestimating economic growth, which everyone knew it would. There is nothing in the score that is a surprise. That's the crux of the argument, Guy.
Yep.
That Republicans believe this will drive growth.
That's right. So the JCT is a nonpartisan group on Capitol Hill that came up with that estimate. And the reaction we heard there from Senator Langford was something that we also heard, something very similar from Speaker Ryan in response, saying, overall, this is not a surprising score. It's a pretty good score in some ways, but we think it is too bearish when it comes to projecting the growth that will result from tax reform. A lot of Republicans pointing to the nonpartisan analysis from the Tax Foundation, which found the growth would be well over triple that amount over the span of 10 years. So that's a numbers game. That's about trying to project the future. I think what we're seeing is that there are a lot of Republicans who are saying we are willing to do a significant tax cut and simplification package for the middle class and for the business community, even if it adds hundreds of billions of dollars over 10 years to deficits. It's worth it. Let's get it done. And Bill, again, based on what I heard this morning, the question seems to be how many Republican votes are they going to get? Is it going to be 50, 51, or 52? But at this point, based on what I'm hearing, it would be really shocking if they didn't get to 50, which is what they need.
Guy, thank you. We'll see, right?
We will.
Coming up here, thank you, Guy Benson there in Washington. We believe they'll come back to the floor of the Senate around 11 a.m. Eastern time. But
could certainly happen.
We're going to get a lot of reaction coming up during our 2 hours.
And
here,
in about 20 minutes, we'll get reaction from the stock market as well, because we know that's been rocking it.
24,000, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, plus a lot more news to get to today. Matt Lauer seen in public for the first time since his shocking firing over sexual harassment allegations. And now new reports on his push for a $30 million payout. More on that in a moment. Plus, remember this.
I want to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter.
That was the former FBI Director James Comey describing the infamous tarmac meeting between Bill Clinton and then AG Loretta Lynch. This was in the middle of the Hillary Clinton email probe, and now the FBI turning over documents about that meeting, and we'll tell you what's inside those papers coming up here.
Plus, new signs that North Korea may be getting ready to test another missile. Those details next.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally found in jellyfish, Prevagen is the #1 selling brain health supplement in drugstores nationwide. Prevagen, the name to remember.
Forge of Empires. Develop your own city from the Stone Age to the future. Available in the App Store and at FOE.tv.
Morning on the beach was so peaceful, until it wasn't. Don't let type 2 diabetes get between you and your heart, because your risk of heart attack or stroke is up to 4 times greater. But there are steps you can take to lower your cardiovascular risk. Talk to your healthcare provider today about diabetic heart disease. And find out more at heartoftype2.com. Your heart and type 2 diabetes. Make the connection.
Your home network may not be as secure as you think. Even if your Wi-Fi router is password protected, cyber criminals could get into your network through connected devices and steal your personal and financial information. Introducing Norton Core, a secure Wi-Fi router. Core monitors your connected devices and helps quarantine any threats. Norton Core, a secure Wi-Fi router with the speed you want and the security you need. Act now to enjoy $100 off plus free next day shipping with promo code BUYCORE at buynortoncore.com.
I personally guarantee that my pillow will be the most comfortable pillow you'll ever own. It's machine washable and dryable, comes with a 10-year warranty and my 60-day money-back guarantee. Go to mypillow.com or call now to order one of my pillows. Use the promo code and I'll give you a second MyPillow absolutely free.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
New satellite images obtained by Fox News show that North Korea could be preparing to launch another missile from the same site where the regime fired its first.
16 past, the FBI now turning over dozens of documents from that infamous meeting on the tarmac between Loretta Lynch and the former President Bill Clinton. That paperwork now part of the public record after the DOJ had kept it private. Jordan Seculo, attorney for the American Center for Law and Justice. So, sir, good morning to you. Take us back to, what, the summer of 2016. What do the papers show you, do you believe, Jordan?
Well, originally, Bill, the FBI had told us that they had no information. They had DOJ, when we took DOJ to court, finally did give us documents about this tarmac meeting. The FBI said they had nothing. Then there were FBI people in the emails that the DOJ gave us. So the FBI quickly came back before we even had to say anything and said, we'll reopen your FOIA request, expedite it, and get you the documents. Now the documents have come in, and what have we learned? The FBI was mainly focused, when they knew about this tarmac meeting, on keeping it quiet. They did not want people to know about the meeting, and they were trying to shut down an informant, someone who was talking to the press, who was part of a security detail company, and they wanted to get to that individual, get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You know what's interesting here, Bill? They didn't actually care or show any concern about the actual meeting itself. So when Jim Comey said, oh, that was what really drove me to take the action I did to not only announce that what the FBI's findings were, but also say no prosecution because of that meeting, I had to take Loretta Lynch out of it. No FBI officials, Bill, had any concern about the meeting. They just didn't want people to know about it.
Understood. And more to come on this. I think the quote was, we need to find that guy. I don't know if it was a reporter or somebody working at the airport. Listen, more to come on that. There is also more breaking news out of Washington right now, and I'm going to read it for you. Go ahead and explain what this could possibly mean. General Michael Flynn has a scheduled hearing today in Washington. This would be U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras, D.C. Federal Courthouse, Washington, D.C. What could this possibly mean in light of everything we've been trying to figure out so far with regard to General Flynn and his exit from the White House staff?
Sure. Well, if the rumors are correct that there's a plea deal, Bill, this could be to formalize that. Again, that these were the, to say these were the charges that could be brought against him. He has made a plea, so he's pled, whether he's pled guilty or no contest, and to kind of settle that matter and to settle his son's matter. I suspect it could.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me just. I've got a bit more information right now. Apparently, it's the charge is about making false statements here. So that could be about what he is going to address at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That would be charge of lying.
Yeah, and I think that could still work with the plea deal itself. It depends on who's taking him to court, whether this is the special counsel or another matter. But if it is the special counsel, it should be under that jurisdiction. Then those false statements, it could be that he's being charged with them. That could lead to, if it's correct, and we don't know if he actually does have a plea deal or not, but if it's correct, that could be the catalyst that gets the actual plea deal.
Okay, we've been reporting now for a week that the lawyers for Flynn broke off contact with lawyers at the White House about 2 weeks ago, so prior to Thanksgiving. And we were led to believe that, there's a mutual sharing between attorneys while the case is proceeding. But the break-off of communications would indicate possibly what then, Jordan?
It could mean that he's got the deal, that he no longer needs to be working with the attorneys for the White House on this matter, and that it may also only relate to these activities like whether it's lying under oath, giving false testimony, business dealings, kind of similar to what Paul Manafort was being charged with, those kind of actions that were totally unrelated to the campaign. I mean, I still believe that so far out of the special counsel, we haven't seen anyone charged with campaign violations. So, and I think that's the the serious part of this.
Okay. Jordan, thank you so much on the fly there for adjusting there.
Sure,
it is
Bill.
breaking news here out of Washington, D.C., where General Michael Flynn's been charged with making a false statement. So more coming up on that as the morning progresses in Washington, D.C., and we'll follow it and bring you what we know when we know it. Right, Sandra?
Right. A lot happening at this hour. We're also awaiting that Senate vote on the Republican tax plan, how the anticipation for that bill is having a major effect on Wall Street.
Also, Michigan Congressman John Conyers facing new calls to step down. This after allegations of sexual misconduct that he maintains are simply not true. Should he resign before the Ethics Committee conducts its own investigation? A lot of questions coming up here for Tennessee Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn. She is here live. But first, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi addressing all of that this week.
I pray for Congressman Conyers and his family and wish them well. However, Congressman Conyers should resign.
Here we go. The breaking news now to Washington. General Michael Flynn will be in court 1 hour from now, District Court in Washington, D.C. He's been charged with lying to the FBI. This seems to date around an interview that took place on January 24, 2017. So that's within a week of the inauguration, during the beginning of this term for the Trump team. And it references a conversation or some discussion he had with the Russian ambassador about 4 weeks prior. So this would be the end of December 2016 during the transition now. December 29th is stated here, December 22nd, 12/22, 2016. The court order reads that Flynn did not ask the Russian ambassador to refrain from escalating a situation in a response to sanctions that the United States had imposed against Russia that same day. So what did Flynn tell the FBI? What was he honest about? And what did he lie about? And that last part is where the court will zero in today.
And in the opening statement of the U.S. District Court document, it details that Flynn did willfully and knowingly make materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements and representations in a matter within the jurisdiction of the executive branch of the government of the United States, to wit, the defendant falsely stated and represented to agents of the FBI in Washington, D.C., and it goes on to detail. So what we know at this point, Bill, is that Michael Flynn, 58 years old, of Alexandria, Virginia, 10:30 a.m. he is due before the U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras at the D.C. Federal Courthouse on 3rd and Constitution. That's what we know at this point.
Yep. So December 29, 2016, then a week prior, December 22nd, 2016. On that day, the court document reads that General Flynn did not ask the Russian ambassador to delay the vote on or defeating a pending UN Security Council resolution, and that the Russian ambassador subsequently never described to Flynn Russia's response to his request. So what did he say about it? What did he omit? Did he change his answer? All this is something that we believe will be playing out today in court.
That, by the way, is a live shot outside of his home in Alexandria, Virginia. Obviously, they're awaiting him in court at 10:30. That is just over an hour from now, so we'll keep watching that. Meanwhile, Catherine Herridge is ready to go on this breaking news. What can you tell us, Catherine?
There's sort of three things that jump out at me, Sandra. First of all, over the last 72 hours, I've been in touch with a number of individuals who are close to Mike Flynn, and they indicated that they thought something was imminent in his case, and they sensed a certain amount of agitation with him. So that brings us to today. The key section of this document, as you and Bill have been talking about, is really at the bottom of the second page, where it talks about 18 U.S.C. 1001. This is what lay people call the Martha Stewart statute. It's lying to federal investigators, and this is the focus of this plea agreement or plea paper. The one thing I would say about December 29th is, when you think back to that period about a year ago, Mike Flynn had at least 2 interviews based on my reporting. And on December 29th, if my memory serves me correctly, he was outside of the country on vacation with his wife and had a conversation with a Russian official, and that was picked up as part of the intelligence community surveillance. It's still not clear to me whether this was as the result of a FISA order that was on Flynn or whether this was a routine collection because he was outside of the United States and he was in contact, in communication with a foreign official. So he wouldn't have the same, you don't necessarily have the same protections once you're outside of the United States.
Okay.
So those are the sort of three things that really jump out at me about the document.
Catherine, one other thing here, and this could be significant, perhaps it's not. George Papadopoulos, right? Foreign policy advisor, unpaid, age 30. He entered a guilty plea as well, right? And he apparently had meetings in April of 2016 about emails related to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Could this be entirely separate from what we're talking about here with General Flynn?
I think we want to be
two entirely different matters.
I think we want to be careful about speculating about the connection at this point, in the sense that George Papadopoulos, based on my reporting, was a real low-level person in this foreign policy sphere, which was really dominated by Mike Flynn. So I think we want to see what we get at the hearing today and whether there is, in effect, a connection between that plea agreement with Papadopoulos, who also had a violation of 1001, so the lying to federal investigators statute, or whether it's completely separate. But again, what jumps out at me is this key date at the end of December. Flynn was outside the country, traveling on vacation with his wife, and the question has been whether this was picked up as the result of a FISA warrant, a surveillance warrant specifically for Flynn through the U.S. intelligence courts, or whether it was picked up almost as routine collection because the U.S. intelligence community targets the Russian ambassador and others. And once an American citizen is outside of the United States, they don't really have the same protections in the sense of how their communications are picked up.
Very, very interesting. That goes to the issue of unmasking, does it not? Who was talking to whom and whether or not you're essentially watching what Americans have to say when they're speaking with foreigners.
Well, there's unmasking, and then there's what I would call a formal request with the intelligence courts to track the communications of an American citizen, so that's through the FISA court. Unmasking is done when you have intelligence collection. It's often on foreign targets, such as Russian ambassador, and Americans who are swept up in that, not the target of that surveillance, are identified as like American person 1, American person 2. So the unmasking is the identification of those people. But they're really kind of different things, Bill. A FISA warrant is a very targeted decision by the U.S. government and the intelligence community to go after an American citizen. It's a fairly high bar. They've got to have permission from the court. Unmasking is sort of a lower level situation where you've got a foreign target, you sweep up Americans, and then an individual asks for them to be identified.
So, Catherine, we're trying to just come down to the basics here because he's expected in court at 10:30. We don't have confirmation yet that he will appear in court, but we have a camera obviously staked outside of his house there. We'll see if and when he departs. Have we gotten any other response from anyone inside the White House to this yet?
Not in the last 10 minutes since I've been looking at the document. The information I have really comes from an individual who is close to the Flynn family, and I can tell you there was a sort of an impending sense that something was going to come down very, very soon, and just given his state of mind and a certain level of agitation about it. So I think I'll leave it at that rather than speculate.
So, Catherine, I'm just going to add a little bit here. The Associated Press is reporting that he will plead guilty to lying.
Yeah.
So it's been an outstanding question for the past 10 minutes. Would he enter a plea? And if this report is accurate, he will enter a plea at 10:30 Eastern Time.
Well, that's consistent with the paperwork that we have here. Again, if you go to that second page and right under the signature of the Special Counsel Robert Mueller, it says 18 USC 1001. I'm just taking a look at it again. Yeah, Title 18, United States Code Section 1001. So for a layperson, it's often referred to as the Martha Stewart statute. It's you haven't necessarily done something wrong, but in the course of the investigation, you lie, deliberately mislead federal investigators. And every time you do that, that's an automatic 5-year penalty. So it has a lot of, there's a lot of negative impact for the individual, and that's supposed to be a way to encourage people to tell the truth when they're interviewed by federal investigators.
Catherine, if I could just start with the first line item. You know, I read the beginning of this court document saying that Michael Flynn did willfully and knowingly make materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements. In the first line item, it says Flynn did not ask the government of Russia's ambassador to the U.S. to refrain from escalating the situation in response to sanctions that the U.S. had imposed against Russia that same day, and Flynn did not recall the Russian ambassador subsequently telling him that Russia had chosen to moderate its response to those sanctions as a result of his request. That's the first one. If I can get you to just shed some light on the two items here.
Okay, so we want to see what happens in court in an hour's time, but again, my read of this, based on my experience covering this area, is that Flynn told investigators that he did not ask the government of Russia's ambassador to put a lid on any kind of escalation after the sanctions, but in fact there are telephone intercepts that show that he said the opposite. So that would be the way to show that what was said to investigators is uncut by the actual conversation. Because remember, at that time, December 29th, Flynn is outside the country with his wife on vacation. And the question again has been whether those conversations were picked up because there was a surveillance warrant specific to Flynn, or whether they were picked up as a result of surveillance on the Russian ambassador and Flynn was unmasked.
Right, and the second and final line item is on or about December 22nd, 2016. Flynn did not ask the Russian ambassador to delay the vote on or defeat a pending UN Security Council resolution, and that the Russian ambassador subsequently never described to Flynn Russia's response to his request.
And so I would say it's, we want to see what happens at the hearing, but I believe it's the same scenario. Flynn made a number of representations to the FBI about that conversation on December 22nd, but it is undercut by other evidence, likely in this case, a phone intercept of some type or email.
Catherine, I know we're doing a lot of this on the fly. Just bear with us a moment here. Do you recall where General Flynn was on vacation overseas at that time?
Boy, I don't want to have a brain cramp here. I want to say I think it was the Dominican Republic. He was somewhere in the Caribbean, I recall, but he was outside the United States at that time.
Okay, and we were talking with Jordan Sekulow a moment ago when this news broke, and we do know over the past 2 weeks prior to Thanksgiving that the communications between his lawyers and the White House lawyers was put on pause, and there was a reason for that. So stand by, Catherine. We're going to go ahead and welcome the rest of our Fox affiliates across the country to our coverage here. We'll pause for one moment right here as the coverage of this breaking news continues out of New York City and Washington, D.C. We pause. This is Fox News coverage as we await Michael Flynn, the general in district court, where he faces charges of lying to the FBI. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning from New York City. The news is just breaking now. Flynn has been charged with falsely telling FBI agents that he did not ask the Russian ambassador in a conversation that took place about a year ago. This is late December of 2016, during the transition period between the Obama administration and the Trump administration. On two separate occasions, the FBI believes that Flynn lied on December 29th when he said he did not refrain from escalating the situation in response to U.S. sanctions. In addition to that, a week prior, on December 22nd, there was a conversation and apparently charged with lying during that conversation with regard to the Russian ambassador as well. Catherine Herridge watching all this out of Washington, D.C. We will see General Flynn in court at 10:30 Eastern Time. Catherine, go ahead and frame it based on what we believe this does for the case overall. Good morning.
Well, good morning. The first point is that based on my reporting in the last 72 hours, there's certainly been a sense among those close to the general that something was very imminent, likely some kind of plea agreement with the government as a result of the special counsel investigation into Russia. When you look closely at this paperwork, what you see here is that the government is saying there was a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001. Mostly people know this as the Martha Stewart statute. It simply means that Flynn lied to the FBI, and the FBI had information that was overwhelmingly clear that was in conflict with Flynn's statements. Based on the timeline in December, it appears at least one of those pieces of evidence is a telephone intercept or an electronic communication that showed contrary to what Flynn told the FBI. This is a very important moment in the special counsel investigation. Flynn will become the most senior person within the Trump administration to reach an agreement with the special counsel over his actions with Russia leading up to the transition in January, Bill.
Okay, so Catherine, does this give us any indication that Mueller is closer to concluding or just proceeding?
Well, Flynn is a very senior individual, and one of the things that we'll need to understand is what attaches to this particular plea. Is there any commitment to cooperate further in terms of what Flynn knows about others within the Trump administration more senior than himself? Or is this an agreement where there attaches a provision that he's pled guilty to this, and in exchange the special counsel will not pursue additional charges or evidence that they uncovered in the course of their investigation? So I think we want to be cautious because we don't know which direction it would take, but those would be among the options.
Apparently the interview took place on January 24th of 2017, so that's within a week of the inauguration of the new administration. Catherine, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We knew about 2 weeks ago that the lawyers for Michael Flynn and the lawyers for the White House that had a level of cooperation, that communication had been cut off, and we're told that's standard legal practice. So it gave some in Washington an indication that this was moving towards something, and now we know. There will be a plea that will be entered, a guilty plea at 10:30 Eastern Time, and we will certainly follow that here on the Fox News Channel and this Fox station for continuing coverage on this story. Thank you for being with us. I'm Bill Hemmer here in New York City. Our coverage continues on cable on the Fox News Channel. As we continue, we'll watch the home of General Michael Flynn, where we believe we'll probably see a car, Sandra, in a matter of moments right here, and the procession will begin down to District Court in Washington, D.C.
A developing story. We're giving you the details as we get them. If he is going to show at court at 10:30, he should be leaving and departing his residence at any moment. We will show you that when it happens. But right now, the AP reporting he intends to plead guilty to one count of lying, for making false statements to the FBI.
One thing you remember about the reason why General Flynn was terminated, remember the president said he did not tell the truth to the Vice President, Mike Pence. I do not recall when that date was or when that conversation happened, but it was around the same area in the early days of the administration when the president made the decision to cut ties with General Flynn. And bear in mind now, during the campaign for about a year and a half, Flynn and President Trump were very close with each other. They were in lockstep on national security, and it was on the Monday night, the first night of the convention in Cleveland, Ohio, where General Flynn was given a prominent speaking role. He was the last speaker of the evening that night in Cleveland, Ohio, so they're very close until the moment that the president decided he wasn't telling the truth.
Well, continuing coverage of this, we're going to bring in Juan Williams, a Fox News political analyst, Matt Schlapp, former White House political director under President Bush. Matt, I'll start with you first. Your take on the breaking news.
Well, Mike Flynn's a friend, someone I got to know during the course of the campaign, and I think it's a tragedy. He had a great military career and a promising political career, and it's come to a really disastrous conclusion over the fact that I guess he didn't take seriously enough when an FBI agent comes knocking on your door, Sandra. You don't have to be under oath for it to impact you legally, and he didn't give honest answers.
Don't lie to the FBI.
Right.
Right. So your take on where the morning goes, as right now, Juan, you've been watching this breaking news unfold. Your thoughts?
Well, the question in my mind is this a plea deal? It's a charge of one charge of lying, but when you think about it in the broader context, is this a deal that then would take Robert Mueller, the special counsel, somewhere? In other words, does Flynn have information that was so valuable that Mueller was willing to enter into a plea deal of, we'll just make one charge of lying, which would have been pretty obvious given what Sally Yates, then the acting attorney general, had told the White House counsel at the time. President Trump was slow to get involved. I think it took him 2 weeks after he was informed to fire Flynn, again, an indication of how much he valued him. And another indication would be, remember, that he told Jim Comey, then the FBI director, maybe you could go easy. And that's one of the things that caused a fissure between Comey and the president. So the question in my mind is, with Flynn vulnerable and Flynn's son, remember, he's part of this equation vulnerable, is Flynn now making a deal with Mueller and the prosecutor